In this episode of the Construction Dorks, we're talking to the next generation of construction technologists, Walker Lockhart and James Simpson, two of the brightest minds in construction tech, and giving them a chance to catch us up on their journey from construction to software space and even into manufacturing. It was a great conversation, so pull up a seat, grab a drink, and let's talk tech. And we're live, episode 86, The Next Generation Journeys with James Simpson and Walker Lockhart. That's right. We're bringing two of our friends back that are, we believe, and we could say this because we are the elder statesmen in this world now, the
Very
future
elder.
of construction technologists. Yeah, very elder. Um,
I don't
and,
like that.
well, Trent, if the shoe fits, you know what they say. Um, and I'm really excited actually to sit down because these are two guys that I've gotten to interview before, got to hang out with. Love watching people's careers, love watching the future. So I'm really, really psyched. But it is back to school night, so yours truly is not having a cocktail tonight until after back to school night. So I'm gonna kick it to you, Jonathan Marsh, and see what you got kicking today.
I got a cool one, man. So I have Jack's Choice, and it's one of the ones that you can get at like what's it called, the Spirits and Spice store in Vegas. And this particular one was really old, and it was sitting on my shelf, and I'm like, I got to drink it. And I actually got it because the dude Trent there was throwing points one night, and me and McGuire were betting on his craps, and he just kept throwing points till I had enough money to buy some decent Irish whiskey.
That's been a
Um,
long time ago. Holy
Dude,
crap.
super long time ago. It's like 4 or 5 years old, if not older. Actually, it's probably older than that. But we finally took it out. It's a really good Irish whiskey. If you get the chance, it's actually pretty reasonable for the price. And hey, man, if you're winning in Vegas, you should be buying some whiskey.
I remember that night. That was a heater. That
That
was a good
was
one.
fun. Trent, what are you drinking today?
Yeah, I've got the one of the Indiana bourbons. This is one of the ones I mailed you guys a couple weeks ago, but it's the Henry A. Sipes, the 4-year aged Indiana straight bourbon whiskey, not the Kentucky variety. These are finished in a rum cask, so they're pretty
Decent.
they're pretty sweet. So I've got and of course the shameless plug. I've got the MEP innovation. Yep. Ah, there we go. There we go. Great minds
We're
think
matching.
alike.
We're matching.
Well,
Let's
did
throw it-
did we
let's throw it to
sucker
Walker,
you?
right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Walker, what do you got?
I have about 2 liters of water here. Has my name on it too.
That's your
Duct
name.
tape.
That is Walker's.
Yeah, there are many like it, but this one is mine.
I'm only slightly more interesting. I've got a giant Sonic peach ring.
That's a power move.
It's definitely
Honestly not bad at all. Like, it's pretty decent.
I miss Sonic drive-throughs for those. It's like the
Yeah.
only fast food joint, like driving through, just getting a drink is like a thing.
We had
And
one open
it's worth it.
recently next, like close to me. It's kind of I didn't know they were still opening them, so it's kind of cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're around.
Well, listen, we got through that. We're gonna get rolling quick. I'm gonna start with James. James, kind of tell people you've kind of had a history in the industry. You started out a while back. Give people kind of an idea of where you started and what the journeys look like to where you are today.
Oh man. I think the short and sweet of it is basically really have been like in VDC ish things since I was like literally could drive. Was at a company, Art Plumbing, here in Atlanta for like several years, doing VDC modeling ish activities, like pretty much everyone. That naturally expands into doing like your own add-in development, even like your own web development. Like as you scale those operations, it's a big connected web. So led a lot of those. That's kind of how I got into a lot of like software engineering, and then that's honestly also how I got on the whole conference circuit. Met a lot of you guys around that time, and then joined Evolve MEP, which I think is now just Evolve. But joined there, first PM gig, like got my teeth cut on like what it actually is, like running the vendor side of the business and being a part of that. And met most of all of our friends from that role. And then I don't know, man, kind of got like itch where it was like, well, at that point I had been in, we'll call it like MEP tech since I was like I said, however, like 16. It was really looking for something different, trying to like figure out the other sides of the business. So I went to a company out in Nashville called Built Technologies, which was all like loan management, GC sub payment, like that kind of side of the business, and worked on their platform team. Learned a ton there. Real accelerator, I think, for like me professionally and personally. And then most recently was at Via Technic, and then now here at ASC, and here at ASC leading their kind of digital initiative and a lot of stuff we're doing here. So that's the short and sweet of it. Just because I'm not a fan of the whole monologue of like things, but I'm more than happy to dig in on anything.
Yeah, I think we'll grab Walker's here in a second, but I like that, you know, starting in the field of actually doing the work in plumbing and then finding that it leads
Yep.
to software development and then finding your way to kind of loop through is an interesting thing for people to talk about. And Built is one of those ones that, you know, real success story too. Like love good success stories on software products that make it and make a difference. So it was we'll dig into that a little bit. Walker, why don't you give your sort of background and we'll draw some comparisons, have some fun.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me, guys. Really enjoying this. But yeah, started out at a mechanical contractor in the Dallas Fort Worth area, actually as an assistant project manager, mainly on medical projects and renovations and things like that. On the commercial side, they were called Pulp Mechanical, great company. Yeah, I did that for about a year and a half. I did VDC for 2 years, and then for about 6 months before I left there, was an applied technology specialist focusing on how to get technology into the hands of those guys and girls in the fields to improve everybody's lives, whether you're turning a wrench or submitting a purchase order. So from there, I went to Dado and started out in customer success there. Did that for a few years and then moved into software engineering. I was doing a lot of engineering as a customer success manager anyway. I had a little bit of chops from some side gig hustle that worked really well to fix issues for customers instead of putting that on engineering shoulders. And it just moved naturally into a full time engineering role. And so yeah, I was there through the purchase and about a year after the purchase of Dado by DeWalt, and then moved on to another startup called Arhive, or senior full stack engineer, working on the everything from our front end to our back end, our API and databases and whatnot. Trying to walk the line of technical speak and just respecting where everybody's at. But yeah, spent the last year doing that work as well.
Again, working from the field through fixing things, then applying technology and then building it. It's kind of a cool process to watch, especially because like a lot of that didn't. You guys came in right at the time in the industry when those two things, those forces were hitting each other. Right, there was a lot in Revit and you know the plugins that you could do. And I remember specifically, it's kind of funny. I can draw the. I met both of you at an MCAA technology event. I know for sure that's where I met each of you. And
Yep.
really hearing you guys talk about like, hey, the things we have aren't enough, so I'll just make them. And I think that's a unique thing to coming into construction, coming into, you know, you guys both in, you know, mechanical plumbing, that you have this mentality of like, we're just going to fix it. And I'm interested, like, I'm Walker, I'll spin it back to you because, like, Polk had you as an APM, you're out in the field, you're doing things. Like, what was that push? What was the thing that let them get you into VDC or led them to make you want to be in
Yeah,
VDC?
I think. I mean, I'd always had a knack or an interest in technology, and I would say I do enjoy helping people. I find a lot of personal satisfaction and drive from helping people. Maybe it makes me feel important. I don't know. So I mean, I just kind of became a resource for that anyway. And I think the first thing that really happened that kind of nudged the journey over towards becoming a construction technologist was that there's this local organization called Texo, and it's ABC and AGC together for the Dallas Fort Worth area. And they used to have a technology conference for that local chapter. Um, and the president of our company couldn't go to it, and he came to me, and he said, "Why don't you go to this thing and tell me what you see?" And I did, and that was, I think, like I said, one of the first kind of construction technologist things to kick off. I think after that was a JP Knowledge Contact Roadshow, and that's where I met Josh. I may have shook your hand, Jeff, but I don't think we were any better than acquainted there. And the rest is kind of history. Honestly, Polk was a very flexible. They're very flexible work environment, and that they wanted to put people in, I guess, good people. If I can pat my own back and call me a good person, but good people in places where they're going to have a larger impact. So I'm not the only kind of person that they've done that before, or done that for. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to be near the bleeding edge at that point. I think after a year and a half of being an assistant project manager, I want to be near the bleeding edge of construction technology, and that was in VDC.
Mm.
And I got to admit, I didn't love it after a couple of years. I had a hard conversation with my boss, like I can't do this long term anymore, and which is a great conversation because he was like, "Oh, dude, I know, right? Trust me, I know. We have bigger and better plans for you," which was great. It was a really tough conversation. I'm really bad at confrontation. One of the best confrontations I've ever had.
Yeah,
We'll,
that's
we'll
interesting. What, I guess, real quick before we move past that, what didn't you really like? Can we talk a little more about like what were the driving factors of that conversation? Because I think there's a lot of people that listen to us that, we even have the internal joke where it's like, hey, something bad happens, you're like, it's still better than BIM. And like, I mean, we joke about this a lot. It's an incredibly important thing that happens in every contractor, it's all over the place, but there's this kind of moniker, and there's a lot of people that don't want to make it a long-term play. So I think it's interesting. What were your big reasons for that? Why do you think it wasn't a fit for you?
I think there were several factors. I think I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an active person. I'm just not an active person. We can drop the necessarily. Don't no need to pretend here. But yeah, and kind of sitting down and drafting, drawing plumbing systems for 40 hours a week was a bit much than what I could tolerate, and I didn't even understand that about myself, then even after 2 years of doing it, I was like, I have no idea why I feel this way. Right. I feel like I'm sitting in acid. And I don't mean to be extreme, but I mean, that's like, like the kind of, I just feel like I'm going to crawl out of my skin. There was a lot. I'm not sure I was great at it, to be honest.
There's not a wrong answer. I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
no, I get it. I also don't want to, I don't want to draw a target on my back and be like, yeah, you got, I guess I don't want to do a disservice to the discipline that it is to be a draft,
you are
to be a BIM coordinator, but it was not for me,
Mhm.
and I wasn't for it, for sure. I remember there was a project here locally. I think it was some dorms over at TCU, and this is one of the best managed like BIM processes by a GC that I had ever experienced. And it was grueling because practically every hour they would do a clash detection, and they would send you an email of your screw ups. And I was doing stuff like just moving things out of walls, and then I would ship it, and then I would get an email about that about an hour later. It was just a beat down, every single day, around 8 times a day. And of course, I'm getting to the point where it's like, I don't want to do it. I'm burnt out. I don't want to do it. So I'm going to try to get it done as quickly as possible. And then I make another careless error. So yeah, I moved. Yeah, okay. I shortened this over here, but as a result, I actually didn't really shorten it. I moved this pipe out the end of a 90 on the other side. On the other side of that, so stuff like that was happening. I was definitely in kind of in a mindset. Jeff, I think you were one of the people that I reached out to at that period of time. I was like, I need to find another job. I can't do this anymore. And I think it may have been you that told me, but basically I just need to have a conversation with with my boss, and I did.
That's good advice. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
real quick, can we take the same? James, you started out in
Yeah.
VDC though, but can you tell us, like, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about why people are leaving VDC and going into software, or going into other things. They're like, oh, it's the money. And I've never talked to somebody that's like, oh, yeah, it was definitely the money. No, it's always, it's more often something else. So, what was it? And if it's funny for you, man, just say it. But what was your
No,
reason,
Yeah.
James? What was your
No,
reason?
it's a good, that's a good question. I started out in VDC. I started out in spooling specifically, and more specifically than that, spool tag moving, because like that's at the time, like that's the legitimate kind of grunt work. We didn't have automation around it. Like this is
Yeah.
early, you know what I mean? So like there was no like good spooling tool that like placed tags for you without overlap kind of stuff, right? And so that was the first gig that I was actually doing, and like I would say that's part of the reason. Like that was the initial itch that made me start doing software, because I got so frustrated in my own repetitive task, where it was like, all right, like this is not sustainable. Like because like I looked at how much time I was spending in it, so I had my own personal frustration. But then like you inherently are like, this isn't a scalable thing. Like I mean, you can have an army of like college grads or like whatever kind of like entry level folk like want to come in and do the work, but like it's not scalable. So funny enough, like that's what actually led me to start. But I would say like what led me to continue was, I think, impact more than anything, as corny as it is, where it was, if you build software right, you build it meaningfully and you build it right, like your impact is truly exponential. Like one of my greatest, once again, like all cliches known, like one of the greatest joys I've had out of my career is like all of the people we know and building things that legitimately are helping all of them with their job. Hopefully, you know what I mean. So like that really, I think like initially it was like just the interest of like, oh, that'd be cool. You know what I mean? Like I can go work with bread stacks. Like that's a cool thing. But what's really kept me is like that. So it's like a winding answer, but it's like personal frustration got me started. Just like general, that's kind of cool, interesting thing like got me in it. Like, and then like really the leverage you have when you do it right is what kind of kept me in it.
Isn't that like every entrepreneurial or origin story though? Some kind of
Yeah,
like
that's
there's
true.
always a frustration always leads to action, right?
Well, it should, hopefully. Otherwise, it just leaves a disgruntled, right? But like,
Yeah.
which is that's a totally different thing. But yeah, anyways, yeah, it's an interesting point. I think if I had started out more of like a traditional plumbing engineering kind of like path versus it starting like legitimately at prefab and like kind of just because there's so much pain point there in automation, it made me get into automation things very quickly. Versus if I had went a more traditional route and came from like design down, I think I probably could have. I could see a world where I could have stayed in design some, because there's a good plumbing, good design's good design, no matter if you're doing plumbing, software, whatever. Like the general principles are the same. So I could see a potential to have not, took the same path.
So I have a question kind of going back to what Walker said. Um, Walker, the story that you told of saying, yeah, I'm doing it, but I can't do it long term, I think is the story that we get from most people that are in BIM. That's kind of like why anything better than BIM started out. And I've been talking to a lot of owners that are looking for BIM people. And what I'm noticing is that the people that are looking for BIM people also burn out their people as fast as they can hire them. They'll hire them and literally 12 months later, that person will be walking away. Does that enter into either of your minds as you're designing software? Are you thinking about, hey, if I can take away, this level of pain, maybe this becomes a sustainable job? Um, and not just on the BIM side, because James, you were doing a lot of software on the BIM side, and Walker, you were doing it on some other areas. But is part of the reason that you got into this sort of trying to make some of those jobs that are just tedious and very difficult, like actual legit jobs that you can do forever? Because I know very few people. It takes a special type of person to stay in BIM long term, and we love you when you can do that. But it does take a special type of person because of the nature of the work.
I have a question for Walker with this too. It's the same question, just kind of phrased in a different way. The more I think about it, like the more I kind of equate most like working in BIM almost as like working at like a Series A or seed round startup, because it's like so many fires you're constantly chasing all the time. You know what I mean? Like you never like really have like just legit sit down linear work. It's just like whack a mole constantly. And we all know like there's different personality types that match better to different company stages. And so I've always equated it some to that too, of just like it. Not only do you have to be good at BIM, I think in a lot of roles in BIM, you kind of have to have the personality type for it. And I was, as Walker, as you were just talking about like your experience in BIM, I don't know, I was curious of what you thought around that.
Yeah, no, those are interesting points. And Jonathan, just ping me a second if I don't answer your question because it's a little less fresh. It's a little less fresh on my brain. However, yeah, I got to be like when the people who I worked with who mentored me in BIM. I'm not saying that they're not unique and awesome people, but I don't know, they're pretty normal guys. I think when we think about a software engineer, we think about a dude who's in a smelly room. You know what I mean? Is like maybe doesn't have very good personal hygiene
We're
and
laughing because you're accurate, man.
right. But I mean that's what
I'm leaving
With
that
the
one alone.
idea, not with the
yeah,
reality.
I mean, we apply stereotypes like this to all kinds of things. How many times have all of us, tried to explain something that we really need to check how we think about our field employees, right? And so different people in different roles, we're going to be subject to these kinds of stereotypes, and we might even cast them. Um, However, yeah, I think there's a level of I think there are certain giftings that make someone an excellent and long suffering um, BIM practitioner, right? That I personally don't possess. And yeah, I think patience. I don't think just attention to detail, but value for it. I think working in an environment where you really feel like you're growing those skills as well for anybody who has any kind of skill that they're applying is is going to make you feel better about working there. Seeing and experiencing growth, and so yeah, I think in terms of for me, like I said, I really needed more personally. I think I just need more connection to the work that I was putting in, and seeing that value come through from a person at an individual level. Um, I've heard James what you said about wanting to have a bigger impact. I've heard a lot of folks say that, and certainly my heart beats fast for wanting to see the construction industry, have a better work environment as a whole, because we all know the statistics on mental health in construction, right, and how sobering those are. Um, so my heart beats fast for that. But I got to be honest, the best days, the days that I look most fondly on in my career, are the days when I was in a job trailer and just posted up there because not because I had any specific work to do. I was just working from a job trailer that day because I knew that if I was there, someone was going to have a problem that they were going to ask me about instead of instead of just dealing with it, which I think we expect from our field employees a lot at construction companies. So, so yeah, I think I think for me that's the drive that makes me not want to be at a desk, with drawings taped down to it and staring, not necessarily staring at a computer screen. It's obviously not idle, mindless work, even though I feel like I was performing it rather mindlessly. But yeah, for me, it's going out there and seeing how that new bill of materials that we put on there, that new labor estimate that we put on that drawing, how that helps those folks out there. And what's really cool about that is that makes your connection to the customer, the person, that product, that bill of material that was made just a little bit more accessible. It makes the feedback loop from that person to actually being able to make a change so much shorter, and that just excites the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Pardon my French.
I have I have a theory and an add-on similar to what you're talking about of why I think some of the same things exist that you talked about. And I think it really, now I won't say not every company is guilty of this. There are a few that really do a good job. And I think it's been getting a little bit better with collaborative technology has started to kind of bring this thing together. But one of the problems that BIM always had was it was not a team sport. Like if you looked at what that what that BIM operator was doing, like he was very like the work was kind of thrown at him, and it wasn't like there was a team environment most of the time that was, hey, you've got, you're A to B, I'm B to C. Like that wasn't a thing. It was so I think a lot of stress mounted, and I do think most human beings do enjoy a team environment. I think they like being part of a team. I think they like the delegation, the mission. Like everybody's got their own like kind of sector of fire. I'll go back to my old roots there, but yeah, there's like there's something that you're required to focus on, and he's required to focus on that, and she's required to focus on that. And when it all comes together, there's a beautiful thing. But like that didn't really exist early in BIM. It was I think it's getting a little bit better, but I still think there's a lot of it that isn't. It's kind of like, yeah, he's the detailer on that job, so any problem, yeah, he's Walker's got what you're talking about, the hospital job. Yeah, that's Walker. If you got a problem, call him.
And I can recall very specifically feeling like I wasn't doing well, and I didn't know what I was not doing well. I knew that I was
Well, neither
not
did
doing
anyone
well,
else.
and yeah,
That's the problem. Yeah.
and everybody's everybody's so busy. The person who I need feedback from is I
He's
need
doing another
feedback.
job.
Yeah, I need feedback from the field, right? I don't know if my drawings are good or not to them. I'm getting approval, right, by whoever's coordinating them on the project, but I flatten these out and ship them off into the ether, and never really the wiser as to what I should have done differently next time. And again, I think I was convicted that I would also already wasn't the best at this, and then not really knowing where to go from there. It was a struggle at times.
If
I'm
you're a
kind of
DDC
interested.
director out there, build teams. Trust me.
Yeah, I
What you
don't
wanna
know.
do.
That's sage advice, because actually you're right. Humans need to work in teams, especially even if the work's individual. The team itself has to be moving in one direction, and they kind of crave it. James, I'm kind of wondering the opposite. What your experience was to that, and because you kind of asked him the question, but I'm like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I'm unfortunate enough to like enjoy just firefighting a lot of times. It's probably like an unfortunate trait of mine. I've probably joked with all of you at one time or another that's like I consistently find myself almost always with teams and organizations that are under like rapid acceleration and change, like at some key pivotal moment, and like I somehow find myself there, and I'm like working and like getting a bunch of stuff done, but it's like that feeling, and then I realize like, oh, I think it's me, like I crave that, and I'm intentionally joining those situations and just not realizing it.
Or creating them. I'm just kidding.
Or I'm the problem.
Pyromaniacs.
Yeah. So the point there is like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Most BIM teams, VDC teams, like whatever kind of like construction technology teams, whatever the layer and term you want to use, they are like very much the same, where they're all undergoing like very rapid change, and they're so connected with the organization that oftentimes, like I've always, like I said, equated it to almost like they're in a startup. Like they're constantly trying to find like what their call it like product market fit, like what their technology market fit is for the company, and like what does it, and then they're rapidly leading it. And just like a lot of times when you're in a startup, like you're leading without authority, there's no centralization of authority. It's just like a hodgepodge. And it's just I don't know, I've always found it interesting, because I can tell you, and most folks that you're in software will tell you, after you go through a couple different like sizes of companies, from like seed to Series D or public, you find your niche, like the one that you actually gravitate like your range in. And I think it's the same with construction tech, and like VDC BIM falls in that, where on top of liking it and the craft of it and like, the leverage and all that jazz, you have to also like enjoy a lot of the way that environment is and like the same way. And I don't know. I have nothing tangible there besides just the observation. And I mean, I enjoyed it for the same reasons, I enjoy it now, but I can definitely see how some of it can be a personality trait depending on the same thing.
Well, and I think you can draw that out because I think you're right, James. Like that is it's a powerful thing to know, by the way, and a lot of people are really uncomfortable with it because like it causes people not to be at the companies they found or are part
Yeah.
of early, and there's like a
Yeah. They
painful
hang too
feeling.
long. Yeah.
Well, you hang too
Mhm.
long because you're out of your sweet spot, right? There's very few chameleons that can move through and are comfortable in different stages of growth. So, like, James, you probably, if you've got that startup feel, that chaos to completion or fixing, then if you walked into a giant contractor that's got a huge department that's already established in their tool set, you're not going to be happy. You're just because there's no chaos. But you walk into a contractor that's like, well, I got two
Yeah.
16-year-olds with their licenses who showed up and said there's these computer things to use. What do we do? You're like, let's go. But there are people that need to come in behind you because there is a steady amount of work and process and things that need to get pumped out, and that's what people don't understand in the software business, and I think in the construction business and construction technology business that change. I mean, I go to a number of the big ones that but what you're right about though is there's almost always a pocket of chaos.
Yeah.
So, and you
And,
have
and,
to
no- and normally
know.
it's within the technology work. So
Yeah, and it's no longer the drone, and it's no longer the BIM and VDC, right? Those are established things that we've got deliverables on now, whether they're to the general contractor or they're for reality capture and getting paid on the drone side of things or aggregates or whatever. But there's this other one where it's like, okay, this is chaos. Go enjoy the chaos. And there's certain people you want to continually put in there to keep them going. So
Most,
it's a cool comparison.
most people from construction are going to be more like James, in my opinion. And I think it has to do with the way the business operates in construction. And right now, all these construction companies are trying to be more like manufacturers. And there's a big mindset difference
Different
in the
workforce.
workers because people in construction like to build, they don't like to operate, right? There's like this, and James, it's like you like to build something up. Once it's built, you don't like working in it. It's not like I don't want to sit there and operate what I built anymore. Like I want to go over here and build the new one, right? So manufacturing is very much like operating in what's already established. Like, and that's why there's a little bit of a mental disconnect there in the workforce because it's not what construction people like to do. It's like I want to build it and then I'm done with it. Like that's the end of my
that's the services side of the
yeah.
business's problem.
Mhm.
I was
Well,
going to say that's why you have a construction and services
Yeah, that's
department
their
that are
problem.
not construction services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a wicked environment in the field that's always lighting fires for you. So if you're in the field and you're working on a job that's not overly fabricated, you have all the fires you need. I think both of you, it's kind of funny, and James, particularly you, when you talked about those fires and sort of you kind of jokingly said, or maybe I start them. When we talk about innovation, they talk about wanting disruption. We have big companies out there that say they want disrupted. And that's basically saying we would like you to come and set fire to parts of our business one at a time and then put it back together. And I think that's why you and Walker and a lot of the people that need to sort of, Walker, you're motivated by the helping people and by the answering and solving the problems by putting out the fires. But I think that also there's that innovative part of you that says, well, this the normal is not what we want. So let's start a fire over here where the normal isn't what we want, and we'll have a chance to sort of rebuild it. But keeping with that understanding, James, most of the time that those firefighters, and I think we've called them 60 percenters in the past, me and Trent and Jeff a lot, and said, you're good on the project up to 60% because you're setting it up, you're putting off the fires, but at 70% you're getting bored, at 80% you're monumentally bored, and 90% you took a new job. And when you look at the startup market, it's the same thing. Like at 1 year, those people are awesome. At 2 years, they're awesome. At 3 years, they're kind of looking for another job. At 4 years, they're definitely looking for another job. Do you think that personality type ever gets to the point where you do need to be responsible for that other 40%? Like, is it actually a failing that we
I,
don't finish the things we start?
I'll give my take because it's something I've thought about deeply for like my own personal and like professional growth. Honestly, is I think so. And to be honest with you, like I think it's honestly one of the root reasons I originally joined Built was trying to because it was such a larger company compared to like my normal shtick. Um, yeah, they were like they're kind of like they're really late Series D now. But the point is like pretty decent sized company, a lot of former like Fang or I guess Mang now kind of folks like to. But the point there is, I realized that, and I said like I think it's important. You're always going to have the spectrum of your personal preference, but it's honestly one of the reasons I don't do software engineering anymore. That's why I mentioned this to Walker. I was like, I enjoy projects, but like I could never work a board, like task. Like I get assigned a task and I have to do that task forever. But so it's kind of, I guess, to wrap the thought together, it's kind of like that in that you have to have context of the other 40 and be able to functionally do the work of the other 40 because it's wrong to expect out of an organization you'll always just to be able to only do that 60. Like it's not how like normally life works. So like a project finishes 9 times out of 10, you'll have to be there to the finish, even if you go start a new one right after or something like that. So it's important to have that context and the ability to flex into it, but I think you always gravitate to either being like a operator or a starter for sure. But I'm just really doubling down on I think you do have to purposely go outside that boundary and get that other side because it makes you better at the first one. Like because I now understand at least the essence of operating, I can start better. You know, what I mean, I can understand the operations that's eventually working to you better context.
Yeah.
Walker, what do you think about the last 40%, man?
I immediately thought of another phrase in software development called the first 90 and the last 90. That has some parallels. I want to make sure I got it right, so I looked it back up because I feel like I have it just archived in my head. It says the first 90% of the code accounts for the first 90% of development time. The remaining 10% of the code accounts for the other 90% of development time.
There's a
But
joke
it's
there, but not really. Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Well,
a
I mean, it's
reality, Dan.
sure it's hyperbole a little bit, but I mean, it's even it's like if I'm gonna start a project up, this is kind of crazy. This is also what I was doing as an APM. I did small projects. I had a dozen or more at a time,
Yeah.
and that I was working on, and I had peers who were on one project for 2 years, and there were things that they dealt with and they learned with on the side. But what I learned how to do really good was how to start a project up and how to close it out. And everything from project engineering, verifying product against the specifications, purchasing, working with the vendors, asking them to sharpen their pencils, please, all the way down to closing it down with operations and maintenance manuals and whatnot. And so, yeah, I find that in software, I'm really excited about starting something up, and a lot of it's also thinking about the possibilities of new and exciting technologies that we can apply, and of course with the wisdom that we gain from previous outings, as to what we think is really going to set us up for success. And also, what's just worth the bet today? What's worth the gamble? And what are we willing to accept is tomorrow's problem or next year's problem from a technology implementation software development standpoint. But I think we can also acknowledge that software in a lot of ways, the way that you can build software, it's very easy just to yank something out when it's no good anymore. And I say easy, that is in comparison to a building, to
It's all
brick and
relative, right?
mortar.
Well, and before we go on, I do want to I want to tie those two things back together, James, because actually what you're also talking about is being able to walk that other 40%. You now know what it takes to be 100% team. And those are the best functioning organizations with leaders that have gone through the process to understand how to surround themselves with those people that are the counterpoint to their point.
Yeah.
And to like, if you see the really good ones that have made it, they are actually still some of those core teams, and they surround themselves with the finishers, and they move on to the next market, and it's prepared to finish. And since you now have a respect for how it's operated or finished, you can ladder up. And that's where like this false of the VC funding, that you get the money and then you get the step and you get the step. That's not how it works. It's that you find and build the first fit, you get it there, you fill the team, you step to the next, step to the next, and the money lets you take those risks faster than you could waiting for the ARR to come back. We totally have that wrong. I mean, 100%. And I'm feisty today, and we just have this absolutely ass backwards. And I will fight with you on this one, Jonathan. I wanted to pick a bone with him. Just so sorry, guys.
No,
I'm going to
I
pick a bone
agree.
with Jonathan.
I actually
I'm
agree
picking.
with you on
I'm
this.
picking a bone with you on something else. We have to stop saying we're here for disruption. Disruption
Oh
is a
no, I agree.
byproduct, right? What we want to do is fix problems, and disruption is a byproduct. Like, we don't do that anymore because it sucks and it's gone, and it was the old way. And I say that not because I'm arguing with you, John, because I think, well, I'll let you answer, but I just want to stop hearing founders say we're here to disrupt the construction industry, because you're aiming at the wrong target, right? Aim at the
Correct.
Yeah,
problem.
there's
And
a deep saying, Jeff, that is like, you don't want to have the right answer to the wrong problem. And it's the same exact kind of thing where, like, you don't want to have a product and like, or have technology like in search of a solution,
Mhm.
or a product in search of a solution. Like, it's all the same thematic thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. There's
And
all kind of terms out
it
there.
drives me crazy because they point at Uber disrupted taxis. No, you know what Uber was? Two guys couldn't get a taxi in London and met up in San Francisco and couldn't get a taxi. So they said, well, shit, I have a phone. Maybe the taxi can come to my phone. And instead, they invented a whole new way for ride apps, and boom, it was disrupted. It was a
I,
byproduct.
I think, Jeff, all that what I meant is,
I,
CEOs are asking to be disrupted, which I always thought was hilarious. But you're exactly right. They're not asking be disrupted in areas that really deserve disruption. Like, disruption is where I have a systemic problem. I have a system that leads to a problem. Therefore, I have to break the system in order to fix the problem. That's where you need disruption. So, like when they say we have a systemic problem in our business, you need disruption because it's systemic. If it is a point problem, you do not want disruption. You do not want, like, you don't want problems. You have something that works. You need a point solution. You need to have someone go in there with a scalpel and fix it. I think one of the things that you guys gave some really good answers to the 60 percenter. I think one of the things that I realized when Trent talked about operators is all of the software that we're designing is designed for operators. We're not designing it for other designers 90% of the time. Like, occasionally we'll make something that's a platform where you're designing for another 60 percenter. But by and large, 60 percenters are designing for 40 percenters to operate that consistently again. And I do think it's interesting that I feel like we have the least empathy for them. We're also touted as heroes, which is awesome. And they're like looked over as like, oh, you're just the person that does that same thing day after day after day. And those are the people we're lacking. Is, to be honest, for everyone out there, we're lacking the people that can do something day after day after day, find purpose in it, and make it better. Because 60% means we left you almost half to fix. You have almost half that you have to fix, and we know it's not your strong point, but we can't fix it because we can't empathize. I feel we can't empathize with that 40%. Do you feel, James, when you finished that 40%, did you feel different coming out of it about the solutions that you were providing, or did you feel the same?
Totally different. Honestly, like, totally different.
Can you quantify any of that?
I could try. Like, oftentimes the last 40%. I'll give a really maybe easy example, like, approach, right? Where, like, you build a net new product, so it's a complete greenfield product. It's going to solve a core problem. I'm going to build it. What you don't realize is there's like 6 systems they use today that all halfway or a quarter do that need. All that data lives in the system that currently. And that migration is just as much of a pain as the product that you have. And a lot of times you don't realize that until that last 40% because you get the product initially adopted as a wedge product, they're using it, right? And then long term, it's like, all right, this is now it gets the attention of the business and we're going to really implement this full scale. All right, now that's somebody else's, you know what I mean? And so like when you're in the 40, you realize like just as a quick example, like how important integrations are because like that's part of the 40 and you approach that from the beginning of like all right as an example when you do API first development where from the very beginning we are planning that this system is going to be used across like that like have partner APIs have public APIs there's just a lot to unpack with it but I'd say from like a strategy approach quick example and the same on operations where it's like the last 40% where you're trying to actually measure oftentimes early project you're measuring throughput you're not really or like output you're not really measuring outcome last 40% like you're 100% always measuring outcome and so it's the same thing and like the systems you set up and how you track and how you measure and communicate so I won't belabor that point anymore but like 2 of the best quick examples I can come up with anyway.
Walker, what do you think in regards to that? Like empathizing with those people that are going to be sitting in front of that screen week after week. They're going to be using the products that you produce, and they're not going to have the ability to just change the product or make it better. Where you guys both have the magic power of if you don't like the way it works, you just change it. You know that there's not the ability to do that with them. Like do you empathize with them as you're building products, or how do you think about them? Because I struggle with that really hard. Is finding the empathy to think that way.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to. So in customer success at Dato, you're obviously really close to you're really close to the customer, and that was also at a period of time when we had aspirations of automation. When I just come on, but a lot of things weren't quite fully automated yet. So I was having to put back my document management APM hat. Sometimes and do some white gloving for customers. White gloving for the uninitiated is when you have a human who kind of fills the gaps in for a technology that's still developing, and it's a great thing to do if you're early on and you're trying to prove the value of a product or a market fit without necessarily having the product 100% complete, which isn't a great idea. Trying to prove its fit at 100%. But anyways, so at number one, I was doing document control before and organizing those processes. The construction business I was at before, I made that document control process and I got everybody to follow along with it. So I was able to come to Dato and bring that to the table. So it was pretty easy to empathize with that. However, that did drive a lot of the support and a lot of the feedback that I was giving product engineering, just in terms of the kinds of automations that we needed to add, and all being able to characterize all the different issues. And there's sometimes, if I'm honest, I had customers who had processes that just didn't make a lick of sense to me, and I thought they were dumb. And but I don't want to sound super benevolent in saying that it doesn't matter what I think. I think it does, but to them it doesn't. And what what it matters to them is that I validate. Yes, I understand. And let's bring us back to the drawing board, being able to ask some questions like, well, what if we did things a little bit differently?
You,
What if we did things a little bit differently this way?
yeah, I
So
want to. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I want to pull Trent in, but
Yeah,
I love where you two went because like you actually also just hit another philosophy of like
ruh-roh.
you said it, Walker. eh, Proving product market fit at 100% is a very costly piece, right? You can still pivot at 60 because you're only halfway, right? And
Anyhow,
you because you can be wrong, right? Not about just about your definition of problem, about your understanding, about technological capabilities, whatever it might be. But far too often what they do is not what you got to do, Walker, and actually white glove and think about implementation and think about taking the stress. Far too many of them, and I think this is where I can draw Trent in from his experience back at North, is like far too many of them were like, well, 60% is what it is. You want the shiny tool? Deal with the pile of shit that comes with it. You figure it out. And that's just not good philosophy, because you can, automate a lot of that after you prove it's worth automation, right?
Yeah.
It's worth building the product. And that's an interesting one, Trent, just given, where you were, where you are on kind of how that all comes together.
Yeah. Uh, Walker's right. And, that's Yeoman's work when it comes to kind of like a younger software startup. And, customer success, I think when the product is still fairly new, I won't say like it's not infant, but let's all agree that like the product still isn't where it needs to be, where it should be, where it's going to be. Um, those that customer success department is super important, because that's going to be your differentiator until product does eventually figure out the end goal and get the thing further along. And I think the CS department is something that like a young software group, especially like if you're like a platform software or whatever, and you offer like a lot of different offerings, is something that you kind of scale up early, knowing that it won't be scaled the same way forever. As product improves, your need for more CS will come down. But early on, yeah, it's a differentiator. I mean, I know for a fact we've I've had customers that have come to us from others, and they've stayed with us because they said we were there for them more. We offered more help, more support, more. They were okay understanding that this thing isn't where it's gonna be one day, and they believe in the vision, they believe in the future, and your product team is voicing that vision, that future to that customer, letting them know, you know, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, this is the path. But until then, we're here to help you out and move you through the connecting point A to point B. And yeah, it's super important. I know it's allowed us to win. So I guess if you're a software company who's early in their
Well,
venture, it's an important thing to scale up at the beginning, but it's not an infinitely like, you don't, the goal is not to infinitely scale it. Like as the product improves, it should get better.
Well, but James and Walker, all you guys could, but most of them hire Salesforce first, and they don't hire CS.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately like, so a final thought on that actually, and then directly on that is like what's really important on the 1 to 100 is the same thing like on software, like when you're building a platform, like whatever you're building, like you don't have the full context of 1 to 100. You can't be confident you're chunking the 60 to 60. You may have a 10 and a 40 and then a 50, and you don't have the 30, and so like you have a gap, and like you can get that in process, you can get that in features, you can get that in whatever, right?
Mhm.
Um, but so yeah, then back on your your point around like CS versus sales and like when you hire each, I I think the construction industry is different because it's so nuanced that I mean the reality is, in my opinion, like I think it's a natural state whenever you go through funding rounds. Like it's easier to hire sales, and it's an easier narrative when you're hiring scaling up around sales, especially like when you hit Series A. Like it's expected most of your revenue goes to sales.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like in niche industries, there's 100% an argument to scaling CS because of that versus strictly sales.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a ton that'll tell you that story underneath but they don't want actually that is the bigger narrative for some reason, and that I don't understand. But
Well,
John,
I get the reason. I
yeah,
mean, you
I know
want
why they do it. Logos and money, etc. I
well,
get it. But
money is not infinite, and money spent needs a result, and the overall result needs to be product, and it needs to be expansion of who uses the product.
Hmm.
So it's
yeah,
it's it's not a mystery. I mean, sales and product are the end goal. I mean, that's where you want your money to go. The reality of it is, until product gets past a certain threshold, you need people to white glove to, as Walker said, you need that approach, or you're never going to keep you're never going to keep the customers that you've gotten. You're never going to keep that momentum rolling. I
It's
mean,
the main problem I think is, and there's a whole thing around it. I forgot where it is, but there's a whole document around the most common like startups, or not even startups, like public companies used to be startups we talk about today, and the things they originally did that weren't scalable. And so like the one for, I think it may have been Instacart, that like went out and bought all of Trader Joe, like a one of all of Trader Joe's product, and then basically like said that they partnered with Trader Joe's and would deliver Trader Joe's when they just had like basically a warehouse full of all of their products like one time. So the point I'm trying to make is like I think it's a the reason it's normally not indexed towards CS is like, well, that's not a scalable acquisition model and a scalable growth model, because like kind of isn't,
it
from a
is.
CAC
Yeah.
standpoint and et cetera. But you have to do things that aren't scalable initially, and like that's what's lost. So it's just one of those that I group
Yeah.
into that. Like when you're building these kind of niche companies, is that's one of the things just isn't scalable initially that you do anyway, or kind of have to.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
in order to, Jonathan, why don't you go ahead?
no, no, no. Go ahead. I was going to ask another question. So go.
Okay. This is, there was a short stint, very short stint in product marketing that I did at Dado. Another thing I decided wasn't for me. But something that I became aware of that I hadn't been before was this idea of promises. That sales, through marketing, we make someone aware that a promise might be available, and then sales, we say, yes, we have a promise. Here's what the promise is, and here's how much it's going to cost you to receive this promise. And from there, stickiness. This might be a bit of a naive statement, because obviously there's a lot of factors, but stickiness a lot of times is dependent upon the delivery of that promise, right? And also, so delivery of the promise. Did you need the promise, right? Which is a sales operation early on before we signed the contract. Did you need the promise? Did you understand the promise? And what's Yeah, actually, maybe those two things. No more elaboration on the sales part of the promise, but the delivery, right, of the promise comes down to customer success operations. And when the product can't deliver the promise, people do. And I've for sure had people tell me, second time patting myself on the back, but the reason why we're still here today is because of the service that you give us, and it gives us hope, because that skin in the game is a down payment for the delivery on a promise that's going to happen, in time, right? Um, so yeah, and there was totally a period of time when when we've had to move from 2 or 3 customer success managers to, all right, the product's at a place where we can have one customer success manager who has a way more scalable mindset about how he manages customers to take over all these accounts, and he did wonderfully.
You,
Yeah.
Walker, I gotta say that your answer for talking about CSG for the 60 for that 40% really made me a little jealous. And I was thinking about it as like if you're a VDC manager, you're actually CSG for your VDC department.
Hmm.
Like the most amount of empathy that I got for the field that I grew there was being the manager for the VDC, because I was basically customer success and my customer was the field.
That's a really
And
good analogy.
you gain that understanding of that 100%. But I have an interesting question, because both of you were on here before, and both of you were sort of looked at as the next generation. And Jeff has a little bit of a due date today, or a little bit of a deadline today. If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your former self the last time you were on the podcast, given the fact that you've gone through all of the growth that you've gone through, what would that be? And I'm going to start out with James, because Walker, I feel like you want to think about this for a second.
Yeah.
Sorry,
James
James.
likes to think out loud.
Yeah, sometimes unfortunately so. No, and there's like internal jokes that like if you ever see me like staring upwards, like I'm just like lost in my own thought. I think for me, I I I think the best thing I did was build breadth um, of understanding, and I think early on I made the mistake of trying to assume that all of my growth had to come strictly from the company I worked with, or um, the particular initiative I was on, or whatever. And and exactly. And I realized that two things. I think one of the things I did right, and I'd say do again, is like gain breadth in company size, gain breadth in like things you focus on, roles you're in, like all that jazz. It's really like foundational, especially where I was at in my career and like going into my career. But I think second, it's like, yeah, you both got it. But I think second is like trying to also chase down. I get like to put a bow on the thought. I guess it's the second part is just because like you're not in an operations role or you're not in a product role or like in construction, right? Like you're a spooler and you're not doing like legit like at the coordination side or something like that, or like vice versa. You're on the subcontractor side. You're not doing design build, like you're not doing like actual plumbing design on that side. Doesn't mean you can't learn those things at that time still. Like you don't have to be in that role to help gain some of that knowledge, I guess is the point. And I think that would have been a great advice for me, because it's something I learned a little too late, and like I got really deep on personal projects and just trying to meet other people and network and take on interesting things just for fun. That I think really were a key in helping consolidate a lot more breadth than I was even like already intentionally going after.
Walker, what do you think, man? What really?
Yeah.
And so for people that aren't watching the video, both me and Trent pulled up the book Range by Epstein, David Epstein, because I think that kind of talks about that a lot, like winning through range. And literally was watching Jeff look for his copy of Range also.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
about
learn
why.
your networks. I forgot that one.
Yeah, like why. Yeah, why generalists succeed in a specialized world. Yeah.
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 Walker, what did you think you would tell yourself if you could go back and really give yourself some decent advice?
I the first one is ironic, because obviously you could tell that I wanted to think about it for a minute, and because I'm a measure 3 times or 4 times before I make a cut, and there's been times when that cut's still been wrong, and so therefore I think one of the things I would tell myself is stop worrying about making the wrong decision. Um, I gotta tell you, my biggest strength isn't strategy or macro plays. I need help for that, and I need people to help me see the forest through the trees, and so just just accepting that we're gonna make a decision, and it might be wrong. We did our best, and we're not making decisions that are gonna be blatantly stupid, right? Or decisions that have zero calculation to them. But but if I was talking to me, I'd be like, dude, you're super stressed. Just stop overthinking it, and just hammer it out. Let's go. The other one would along the same lines. The other thing I think I would say is just ask for help every single day, every single chance you get. And I'm not necessarily talking about validation. Finding confidence in oneself, but also I think I think even right now what gives me the optimism to move forward is being authentic enough to be known well personally by people, such that the advice and the insight they can give me is based off of that knowledge of who I am and how I work. And there's a lot of vulnerability in that too, right? I can think in my days as a construction technologist, I held a lot of cards close to my chest. And I'm sure for the people who I was asking for resources for or working for, at times that could be rather enigmatic. So if I were to go back, I'd be like, dude, ask for help. Don't worry about it, right? They see you're struggling, right? You think you're doing the duck thing. You think you look chill on top, and but you're doing that really poorly. And if you stop and you not for the sake of again seeking validation and checking in, but if you stop and ask for help about navigating a certain political situation or not really understanding how to get resources from from a certain stakeholder, that these are things that you should ask for help for. Not knowing how to move, how to level up from 60%, right? That's something that you can ask for help for, either for insight or for someone to be like, okay, well, maybe Walker needs a little bit of help in thinking about these things moving forward.
I actually want to pile on just really quick for like 10 seconds with another personal one because Walker
Go
had a
for it.
personal one, which is, and when he said it, I was like, honestly, I really agree. It's the same theme of asking for help, of being okay with saying, I don't know. I think I was very guarded up until really the last couple of years with understanding like I don't have to know at any given moment, like the exact thing that like someone's like, I don't know that, like, give me more information about that, or like I don't know the answer to that. Like everything's yes, no, number or date, and if it's not that, then it's I don't know, and then here's what I know, right? And like that ability just to accept that you don't have to know everything all the time at that exact time. Your responsibility is to get the information if you don't have it, not necessarily always have it. Uh, that would have saved me a lot of hard lessons and like executive briefings or et cetera, like earlier in my career. I learned it the hard way, unfortunately, a couple of times, but it had been, yeah, that's the piece of advice I really would have given.
Yeah.
I gotta say, man, I love that answer too, because
Those were great answers.
vulnerability,
Yeah.
yeah, vulnerability becomes something that's very, very difficult, and in construction culture, even worse,
Yeah.
even worse.
If you're
And
young and if you're young and coming up, like, you're a driven individual and you're making a name for yourself and you really feel you really like you see this trajectory of where you can go, like I think really in your mind it's like my last, the last bad decision I make is what I'm going to be remembered for, right? And it's going to undo everything I've ever done and it's just not true. There's more to your story, so don't be afraid. Like even if that bad decision does result in your termination of what you are doing now, the people that watch you, the people that see you, I think there's more to the story. Your story's bigger than that one. So yeah,
I,
I think
I,
don't worry so much. There's so much more to it.
I gotta say that I hear out of and I've been a manager and I've said it myself, like why didn't you ask? Like if you didn't know, why didn't you ask? And we get all
Yeah.
upset about that. So if you are a manager out there and somebody asks, for goodness sake, don't push back as if they didn't
Give the
know.
opportunity to ask too,
Yeah,
right?
make sure they
Like
know you can ask.
be like what you have to like what's really important to understand is oftentimes, and a lot of this is maybe personal pressure, but I think it's also probably systemic. I think other people share it when you're coming up, is like you're trying to prove yourself so hard, like you're so hyper fixated on being great, not good, that you're put like that pressure is very intense, whether it's even self-made or like legit. And so the point there is you have to be very intentional about drawing those people in with the safety of being able to learn that habit of saying I don't know. And that's to your point, right? Of like, hey, like, so here's what I just said, and then do you have any questions about it? What about this? Do you get that? Like trying to lead with empathy, like to just give vulnerability to get vulnerability, like that managerial just dance is really important when you're trying to bring in like very driven folks too, because that probably exists for them.
Yeah. There was a scenario, and this is more, this wasn't a manager situation. I was on a job site. I was probably in a job trailer or something like that. I forgot what we were talking about. I think I was talking with this guy Robert. If you watch the Around the Ficus series, by the way, any of those, he was one of the people who I interviewed. If you don't know what Around the Ficus is, it's cool if you don't
You
look that
need to
up.
watch it. It is literally awesome, and you
uh,
need to watch it.
no, I look back on that really fondly, but yeah, I think I remember saying like, it's kind of intimidating being out here. I've never done what you guys do, and I feel like y'all are so busy. Y'all got your stuff. Like Danny's over there. He's got dip spit from 4 days ago still in his beard, and like I'm just not on that level out here. and yeah, that dude Robert, I think it was Robert. He replied back. He's like, dude, I feel the same way around you. I feel like I'm supposed to know all the answers. And so we're over here, like that Spider-Man meme, pointing at each other, and I think in in that moment, we just kind of got to realize that, we're both, in the picture of what needs to be done, we're both incomplete. And
I
go ahead, John.
No, what I was going to say is like I think that is one of the bigger problems we run into is that we if we're looking at the project, we tend to do a good job of asking each other the questions and being vulnerable. But if we're looking at each other, we tend to try to put on how we
Yeah.
want each other to perceive us. Um, Jeff had to step out, and he like literally is texting me. He's like, "Oh, you got to thank those guys because this is one of the better conversations I've had in a while," and it
Okay.
is for me too. But we are kind of winding down time wise, so I gotta say, because we'll get this on tape and then we can use it against you later. Could we go like another 3 years and then just have you on again and
Yeah.
like just see like where are you now and if me and Trent survive that long, because again we've already got our gray hair, we're already the old people in the room. But I want to thank you too. This has been one of the better conversations, especially kind of looking back if you have not seen their previous interview, I think you should rewind
That'd be
on the
interesting.
YouTube. Yeah, go back to the next gen. This is one of the early dork casts anyways, and really kind of compare the where are they now, because I think you'll find it incredibly striking. Incredibly striking. So thank you so much for being willing to come back on and put up with us again. And I think this has been episode 86 of the Construction Dorks. Thank you for joining us, and
Thanks.
have a great time.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.